Corporate boardrooms have witnessed countless negotiations, but few have ended with the kind of seismic shift that would send shockwaves through Wall Street and beyond. This is the story of Dr. Amara Johnson, a brilliant CEO who chose dignity over dollars, and how one moment of courage redefined what it means to stand for justice in America's highest echelons of power. The 37th floor of the Meridian Tower hummed with the quiet intensity that only accompanies deals worth hundreds of millions. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a commanding view of the city below, where millions of people went about their daily lives, unaware that their futures might be shaped by what happened in this room. Dr. Amara Johnson adjusted her blazer and checked her watch one final time. At 42, she had built Tech Vanguard Solutions from a startup in her garage to a multi-billion-dollar enterprise that revolutionized cybersecurity for Fortune 500 companies. Her journey from the daughter of a Birmingham factory worker to the helm of one of America's fastest-growing tech companies had been marked by brilliance, perseverance, and an unwavering commitment to excellence. Today's meeting represented the culmination of 18 months of negotiations. The Blackstone Hartwell Group, led by patriarch Richard Blackstone III, was prepared to acquire Tech Vanguard's revolutionary quantum encryption technology for $500 million. It would be the largest deal in her company's history. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and Dr. Johnson stepped into the marble-lined lobby of Blackstone Hartwell's headquarters. The receptionist, a young woman with perfectly styled blonde hair, looked up from her desk with a practiced smile that seemed to falter slightly upon seeing her. "Ma'am, are you here for a delivery or maintenance?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a gun that had already been fired. Dr. Johnson had faced this assumption countless times throughout her career. The reflexive belief that a black woman in a corporate setting must be there in a service capacity, rather than as an equal at the negotiating table. "I'm Dr. Amara Johnson, CEO of Tech Vanguard Solutions. I have a meeting with Mr. Blackstone." The receptionist's face flushed as she quickly checked her computer screen, her fingers trembling slightly on the keyboard. "Of course, Dr. Johnson, I apologize. Please take the express elevator to the 42nd floor." The elevator ride felt longer than usual, each floor counting upward like a countdown to something significant. Dr. Johnson had built her career on being prepared for every possible scenario, but today felt different. There was an electricity in the air, a sense that this meeting would be remembered long after the contracts were signed. The boardroom doors opened to reveal a space that spoke of old money and older power. Dark mahogany panels lined the walls, and oil paintings of stern-faced men in 19th century attire gazed down from their gilded frames. Around a massive conference table sat 5 individuals who collectively controlled assets worth over $50 billion. Richard Blackstone III, patriarch of the Blackstone fortune, occupied the head of the table like a king holding court. At 78, his silver hair was perfectly coiffed, and his navy suit bore the subtle hallmarks of Savile Row tailoring. To his right sat his son, Richard IV, a man in his early 50s, whose inherited wealth had never been tempered by the humility of having to earn it. Victoria Blackstone Hartwell, Richard III's daughter, possessed the sharp features and colder demeanor that often accompanied generational privilege. The other 2 attendees represented the financial interests at stake. Margaret Worthington, whose family's investment bank had weathered every major economic crisis since the Great Depression, and Charles Pemberton, whose hedge fund managed pension funds for millions of American workers. Dr. Johnson, Richard Blackstone III, rose from his seat with the practiced grace of someone accustomed to commanding attention. "Welcome to our little gathering." The word little struck an odd note for a $500 million acquisition, but Dr. Johnson took her seat at the opposite end of the table with the confidence of someone who had earned her place through merit rather than inheritance. "Thank you for having me, Mr. Blackstone. I'm excited to discuss how Tech Vanguard's quantum encryption technology can revolutionize your cybersecurity portfolio." Richard IV leaned back in his chair, a slight smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "Before we dive into the technical details, Dr. Johnson, I have to ask, you did actually develop this technology yourself, correct? I mean, you have the educational background for this level of innovation?" The question landed like a physical blow. Dr. Johnson's PhD in computer science from MIT, her dual master's degrees in cybersecurity and business administration, and her 15 peer-reviewed publications in leading technology journals were all matters of public record. Any competent due diligence would have uncovered her credentials within minutes. "I hold a PhD in computer science from MIT, where I graduated summa cum laude." The The quantum encryption protocol we're discussing today is based on research I began during my doctoral thesis. Victoria Blackstone Hartwell exchanged a glance with her brother before speaking. It's just unusual, you understand. We don't often see people like you in positions of such technical authority. The words, people like you, echoed in the suddenly quiet room. Dr. Johnson had heard variations of this phrase throughout her career, each time cutting a little deeper despite her professional armor. But today, something was different. Perhaps it was the magnitude of what was at stake, or perhaps it was simply that after 2 decades of excellence, she had reached her limit. I'm curious what you mean by people like me, Miss Blackstone Hartwell. The room's temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Victoria's face flushed slightly, but her composure remained intact. Well, it's just that cybersecurity, particularly at this level, has traditionally been dominated by individuals from more established backgrounds. Richard III attempted to steer the conversation back to safer ground. What my daughter means is that we value innovation from all sources. Now, regarding the technology transfer, but the damage had been done. Charles Pemberton, who had remained silent until this point, leaned forward with the expression of someone about to deliver what he considered wisdom. Dr. Johnson, I hope you understand that this acquisition represents a tremendous opportunity. $500 million would set you up quite comfortably. You could, start a foundation or something, help other people from your community. The condescension in his voice was unmistakable. The implication that Dr. Johnson should be grateful for the opportunity to sell her life's work and retire to charitable pursuits struck at the heart of every assumption about her capabilities and ambitions. Margaret Worthington nodded sagely. Charles makes an excellent point. This could be your legacy, helping others like yourself achieve success. Dr. Johnson looked around the table at faces that reflected generations of unchallenged privilege. She thought of her father, who had worked double shifts at the steel mill to pay for her education. She thought of her mother, who had cleaned offices at night to afford the SAT prep courses that opened doors to her scholarships. She thought of every brilliant mind she had encountered who had been overlooked or underestimated because they didn't fit someone else's narrow definition of excellence. Gentlemen, Ms. Blackstone Hartwell, Miss Worthington, her voice carried a quiet strength that commanded attention. I want to make sure I understand your position correctly. You believe that because of who I am, because of what I look like, this technology couldn't possibly be the result of genuine innovation and expertise? Richard IV shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Now, Dr. Johnson, nobody said that. You didn't need to say it explicitly. Her words cut through his protest with surgical precision. Your questions about my education, your surprise at my technical authority, your suggestion that I should be grateful for the opportunity to sell my company and help others like myself. The subtext is quite clear. The room fell silent except for the barely audible hum of the building's ventilation system. Outside the windows, the city continued its relentless pace, unaware that a moment of reckoning was unfolding high above. Dr. Johnson stood from her chair, her movements deliberate and controlled. Tech Vanguard's quantum encryption technology isn't just revolutionary, it's essential for the future of digital security. Our algorithms can process encryption keys at speeds that make current systems look like stone tools. Fortune 500 companies, government agencies, and financial institutions are all desperate for this level of protection. She walked to the window, her reflection ghost-like against the glass. But more than that, this technology represents something you seem incapable of understanding. The power of innovation that comes from perspectives you've never considered valuable. Richard III's voice carried a note of warning. Dr. Johnson, I hope you're not about to make a decision you'll regret. $500 million is a substantial offer. You're absolutely right, Mr. Blackstone. It is substantial. She turned back to face the room, her expression serene despite the magnitude of what she was about to do. Which makes what I'm about to say even more significant. The silence stretched taut as a wire. Victoria Blackstone Hartwell's knuckles had gone white where she gripped her pen. Charles Pemberton's usually ruddy face had paled considerably. Margaret Worthington sat frozen, as if movement might shatter whatever spell held the room. I'm withdrawing Tech Vanguard from this acquisition. The words hit the room like a thunderclap. Richard IV half rose from his seat, his face incredulous. You can't be serious. You're walking away from $500 million? I'm walking away from $500 million that comes with the expectation that I should be grateful for your condescension. I'm walking away from a deal with people who believe my success is somehow illegitimate because of my race. Dr. Johnson gathered her materials with unhurried precision. You see, gentlemen and ladies, there's something you've failed to understand about Tech Vanguard. We're not just selling technology, we're building the future. And the future belongs to companies that recognize talent wherever it comes from. Richard III's composure finally cracked. This is a mistake, Dr. Johnson. In this industry, reputation matters. Word gets around about people who are difficult to work with. The threat was unmistakable, but Dr. Johnson's response carried the weight of absolute conviction. Mr. Blackstone, my reputation was built on excellence, innovation, and integrity. If standing up for those principles makes me difficult to work with, then I'll wear that label with pride. She walked toward the door, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown to something momentous. I should mention that Tech Vanguard has received significant interest from other parties. Parties who see our technology for what it is, rather than questioning whether someone like me could have possibly created it. The door closed behind her with a soft click, leaving the room in stunned silence. The 5 individuals around the table sat frozen, processing what had just occurred. $500 million in potential revenue had just walked out the door, taking with it their assumptions about leverage and control. The elevator descent gave Dr. Johnson time to process the magnitude of her decision. Her phone buzzed with a text from her CFO. Board meeting in an hour, hope you have good news. She smiled grimly. The news wasn't good in the traditional sense. They had just walked away from the largest payday in company history. But there was something else at stake here, something worth more than money. The story might have ended there, with Dr. Johnson returning to her office to explain to her board why she had torpedoed a $500 million deal. But in the age of social media and instant communication, some stories take on lives of their own. Margaret Worthington, perhaps driven by indignation or simply the need to justify what had happened, made a crucial error in judgment. Within hours of the meeting, she had shared her version of events with 3 prominent journalists, describing Dr. Johnson as unreasonable and playing the race card to avoid legitimate business scrutiny. The story broke on financial news websites within 6 hours. Tech CEO walks away from $500, 0 cents M deal after heated boardroom confrontation. The initial coverage focused on the financial aspects. A Black woman CEO making an emotional decision that cost her shareholders hundreds of millions. But Dr. Johnson had been in the public eye long enough to understand the power of narrative. That evening, she sat in her home office, looking out at the city lights, and composed a response that would change everything. Her statement, posted on Tech Vanguard's website and shared across social media platforms, was a masterclass in dignity and strategic thinking. Today, I made a decision that some will characterize as walking away from $500 million. I prefer to think of it as walking towards something more valuable. A future where innovation is valued over assumptions, where excellence speaks louder than prejudice, and where the content of our character and the quality of our work matter more than the color of our skin. For the past 18 months, Tech Vanguard has worked in good faith to negotiate this acquisition. We provided extensive documentation of our technology, our processes, and our capabilities. We answered every technical question and addressed every business concern. What we encountered in today's meeting wasn't due diligence. It was prejudice dressed up in business attire. Questions about whether I actually developed the technology I've been publishing papers about for over a decade. Suggestions that I should be grateful for the opportunity to sell my life's work and retire to charitable pursuits. Comments about how unusual it is to see people like me in positions of technical authority. Tech Vanguard's quantum encryption technology represents years of research, development, and innovation. It will revolutionize cybersecurity for millions of users worldwide. That technology deserves partners who value innovation over assumptions. We will continue to seek partnerships with organizations that share our commitment to excellence and our belief that the future belongs to those who can see potential wherever it exists. The response was shared over 1 million times within 24 hours. Tech Vanguard's stand began trending as people shared their own stories of facing discrimination in professional settings. The narrative shifted. From emotional CEO cost shareholders money to brilliant innovator stands up to systemic racism. Tech leaders, venture capitalists, and entrepreneurs rallied to Dr. Johnson's defense. Mark Benioff tweeted, "This is what courage looks like in the C-suite." Oprah Winfrey shared the story with her millions of followers, adding, "Some things are worth more than money. Dignity is priceless." But the real vindication came from an unexpected source. Dr. Raj Patel, CEO of Global Tech Dynamics, had been following tech vanguard's technology for months. His company, valued at over $20 billion, had been developing their own quantum encryption solutions, but had hit technical barriers that seemed insurmountable. 3 days after Dr. Johnson's statement went viral, Dr. Patel called her directly. "Dr. Johnson, I've been following your work for years. What happened in that boardroom is unconscionable, but it's also an opportunity. Global Tech would like to propose a partnership that I think you'll find more respectful." The partnership announcement came 2 weeks later. Rather than selling her technology, Dr. Johnson has structured a joint venture that maintained Tech Vanguard's independence while providing access to Global Tech's global distribution network. The deal was valued at $1.2 billion over 5 years, with Dr. Johnson retaining control of her company's technology and vision. The financial press called it a masterstroke. Walking away from the Blackstone Hartwell acquisition had generated publicity that money couldn't buy, attracting partners who valued innovation over assumptions. Tech Vanguard's stock price doubled within a month, but the real impact extended far beyond financial metrics. Dr. Johnson's stand had become a symbol of dignity in the face of prejudice, of choosing principles over profits. Business schools began using the case study to discuss ethical leadership and the hidden costs of discrimination. The Blackstone Hartwell Group faced a different kind of reckoning. Richard III issued a carefully worded statement expressing regret for any miscommunication during the meeting, but the damage to their reputation was significant. Several clients, particularly those with diverse leadership teams, began questioning whether they wanted to be associated with the firm. Victoria Blackstone Hartwell, perhaps recognizing the changing landscape, quietly began implementing diversity and inclusion training across the company's portfolio. Charles Pemberton faced more direct consequences when his pension fund clients learned about his role in the meeting. 2 major clients, representing over $3 billion in assets, terminated their relationships, citing concerns about cultural competency. Margaret Worthington's investment bank saw the most immediate impact. When the story of her sharing details of the private meeting with journalists became public, it raised questions about client confidentiality and professional judgment. The bank's managing partners were forced to publicly distance themselves from her comments and implement new protocols around client interaction. 6 months after that fateful meeting, Dr. Johnson found herself standing before a packed auditorium at the National Association of Black Engineers annual conference. The organization had asked her to deliver the keynote address, and her words would be broadcast to thousands more watching online. "When I walked out of that boardroom," she began, her voice carrying clearly to the back of the hall, "I wasn't just walking away from $500 million. I was walking toward something more valuable, the recognition that our worth isn't determined by others' ability to see it." The audience was silent, hanging on every word. For too long, we've been told that success means being accepted by institutions that were never designed to include us. We've been taught to be grateful for seats at tables where our contributions are questioned and our capabilities doubted. He paused, looking out at faces that reflected every shade of the diaspora, every background and story of struggle and triumph. But here's what I learned that day. We don't need their tables. We can build our own. We don't need their validation. Our excellence speaks for itself. We don't need their permission to innovate, to lead, or to change the world. The applause began slowly, from the front rows where young engineers sat with dreams in their eyes, and built to a crescendo that filled the auditorium. People rose to their feet, not just applauding her words, but recognizing something of their own struggles and aspirations in her story. The future of technology, of innovation, of leadership belongs to those who can see potential in unexpected places. It belongs to those who value the content of ideas over the color of the skin that contains them. It belongs to us. As Dr. Johnson left the stage that night, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The little girl who had dreamed of changing the world while her father worked double shifts had grown into a woman who chose dignity over dollars, and found that the two weren't mutually exclusive after all. Tech Vanguard continued to grow, its quantum encryption technology becoming the gold standard for digital security. But perhaps more importantly, Dr. Johnson's stand had opened doors for others. The company's hiring practices became a model for inclusive excellence, and their internship programs drew the brightest minds from historically black colleges and universities across the country. The story of that boardroom confrontation became more than just a business case study. It became a reminder that sometimes the most expensive thing you can buy is your dignity, and sometimes the most valuable thing you can sell is your principles. In the end, Dr. Amara Johnson proved that walking away from the wrong deal isn't a loss. It's the first step toward finding the right one. Her legacy wasn't built on the money she refused, but on the standards she set for how brilliant minds should be treated, regardless of the bodies that housed them. The future, as she had told that auditorium full of aspiring engineers, belongs to those who can see potential wherever it exists. And sometimes, seeing that potential requires having the courage to walk away from those who can't.